Don't just live for tomorrow, or just live in yesterday. Just be glad for all you have that's in today. And though you've come through many obstacles.
Hey everyone, Connie here, and welcome to my blind reaction to RoboCop 3, a donation reward movie reaction from Venom0027. Thank you, Venom, for another reaction. And this is the last of the original trilogy of RoboCop films. There's the original trilogy that was the late 80s and early 90s, and then there was a 2014 remake, which maybe we'll get to that eventually, but I don't know. It depends on basically whether or not Venom wants to go with it. Yeah. So the first the first movie was pretty good, not amazing or anything, but pretty good. It had a lot of good stuff to it, a lot more blood and gore than I expected, and some good acting. The story was interesting. It was definitely over the top, but not to a weird level. No. RoboCop 2 brought it to the weird level. RoboCop 2 definitely started to take things a little far. It started like really leaning into the cheesiness and hamminess of the property, and it didn't hold as much impact as the first one did. And now the third one, as usual, I know nothing about it, but I assume it's probably going to be even more cheesy and corny. I'm just kind of assuming at this point that they get progressively more so with each one. To be fair, I don't actually have any proof of that. I'm just going off of instinct, and who knows if that's going to be right. I mean, I don't exactly have the most amazing track record with going off of instinct. But you never know. You never know. That's kind of the feeling I'm getting from this trilogy, though. But yeah, I don't really know what to expect from it. I don't really know where this is going to go. And I just don't even think I can figure out story-wise what they would do. Like, I'm sure there's plenty of things that they could just have a robotic super cop handle, but considering what the last movie did with the cult and everything, it's just like, it just seemed like a step down from the first one. Maybe that's just me. That's probably not just me. In fact, I almost guarantee that's not just me. But yeah, I assume all the same main major actors are going to be back for this. I assume that the progression of Murphy's character is still going to be there and everything, and how he's developed and grown throughout the first two movies, everything that they did with him. But I don't know what to expect from this. We'll just see. And as usual, I will judge it fully on my experience with it. Because even if it's corny and cheesy as fuck, it still might be entertainingly so. I mean, you look at some bad movies out there that are unquestionably bad movies, but sometimes they're fun. They're just actually fun to watch. Stuff like Birdemic or The Room. It's just like, oh yeah, they're unquestionably bad. They're without a doubt terrible movies. But they're fucking amazing to watch. Because they're so bad, they're actually kind of good. At least to an enjoyability level. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for here. But I don't know. I have no clue. So we'll have to find out. Um, Let us do so. Let us just get into this because I can't think of anything else I really have to say going into it. So, when the screen fades to black, pause this redirect and go to the description below. Follow the link to the reaction, and after you watch it, come back here to the redirect and resume play. Because after it fades to black and then fades back in, everything from that point forward will be my afterthoughts and will contain spoilers to the episode. To the movie. Sorry. Spoilers to the movie. So that being said, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you at the reaction. Okay, and we are back, and we'll begin with spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. So first off, I want to say, I looked things up. Apparently, Peter Weller wasn't in RoboCop 3 because of scheduling conflicts. There was something else he was doing at the time, and I guess he couldn't get out of it or whatnot, or couldn't make it the time. So it wasn't like disliking the script or anything. And I also looked up this. This is the list of the basic reasons people say this movie sucks comparatively to, I don't know, I guess the previous ones. But most people, I guess, would say the first one especially. The first point is that the movie's PG-13 instead of R, like the first two movies were. And because of that, the violence gets toned down. Point number 2, the film can't make up its mind regarding target demographic. Some scenes it's too childish, others it's too dark. 3, lame action scenes. 4, terrible attempts at comedy. 5, cool concepts like jetpacks and ninja robots, but screws them up. 6, poor special effects. 7, abysmal editing. Apparently the scene where Otomo slices RoboCop's hand off, you can see the actor's arm behind his back. 8, numerous plot holes. Such as the fact that the Prime Directive stopping him from going against the OCP was removed in the second movie. The villains look extremely cartoonish and unbelievable, according to this. Ridiculous scenes, mathematical errors and stuff. And Peter Weller. Apparently, his commitments were with something called Naked Lunch. So, let me talk about my negatives for this. Because I can tell you right now, they're not on that list. At least not entirely. One big negative I had with this is the portrayal of the Japanese characters and just kind of their inclusion in the first place feels really off and a little questionable to me. It seems like they're bringing in like the Japanese characters, like, okay, Japan's so technologically advanced compared to us, so it's like they're kind of relying on that generic idea, and pretty much everything about how they're kind of in there, like you see one scene earlier on when they're walking through the halls and there's just random ass samurai armor that just honestly doesn't belong there, and the robot they send, Otomo, is a ninja basically, and it's like, okay, you're just going with stereotypes now. Like, there's nothing wrong if you want to have like this Japanese company helping out, that's one thing, but to make basically every input they actually have in the movie just stereotypes is questionable at best. And my other issue was that I feel Lewis's death, while I don't oppose the idea of it, was a little too underplayed, I feel. Like, it was a major point of the film, but maybe it's just me, but I feel like it's a weird thing to kind of to phrase it this way, but I feel it should have been dramatized a little more. It just felt very like even Murphy's response to it when it happened, like except for the final moment, like right after she passed, he didn't seem that sad. And I get that he's a robot and isn't able to emote as well, but it's like there could have been something. He could have shown more anger even, because we've seen that he is able to get angry. He is able to get emotive, even if not like to necessarily a full human level. So I just feel like until that last moment where it's like, yeah, it's very obvious he's depressed and sad over it. It's like you don't really see it enough, and just the way it's portrayed as well. It just doesn't feel as dramatic and as important as it should be, considering her role in these films. Um, it's not like the issue that's listed here, with the entire Prime Directive. Like that's the only issue on this list of standard issues with this film. But like the other issues like this, like the toned down violence, I don't mind that. The violence was still very much there, and honestly, it was what it needed to be. Um, the entire target demographic thing, some scenes it's too childish, others too dark, and it's like, no. I felt like the tone was actually very consistent in this. Um, the action scenes being lame is an extremely, um, like subjective viewpoint. Like that can't really be. I mean, you can say that's why you didn't like it, but you can't levy that as a real criticism of the film. I feel, because that's inherently subjective on whether or not you think an action scene is lame or not. Same with the terrible attempts at comedy. Comedy is extremely subjective by nature. So, and that's really what a lot of these issues tend to come to. The ones that actually do have like legitimate backing to them, like the editing issues, it's like I didn't even notice. Like if you're looking for that stuff, or if you're like if you have an eye for that kind of stuff, yeah, you're gonna notice. But I, as just a regular viewer, I didn't notice. And the plot hole about the OCP directive being removed in the past movie, it's like, yeah, that one I at least get. Though I don't feel like it really hurt the movie all that much. But then there's some of these that just, honestly, I feel are completely unfounded. And the biggest one is the villains criticism, which is number 9 on this list. The villains, especially Paul McDaggett, John Castle's character, are written in a way that makes them look extremely cartoonish and unbelievable, in contrast to Clarence Boddicker, Kurtwood Smith, and Kane, Tom Noonan, who were decent and menacing antagonists. I very much disagree. While I was fine with the other villains, though Kane was just, he didn't really have a presence at all. I would say McDaggett is a great villain here. And honestly, very realistic. Like they say he's extremely cartoonish and unbelievable. No. No, he is not. He is actually very realistic in terms of that portrayal. That's unfortunate that there are people like that in real life, but yeah. And the other one that I really had an issue with on here was the last why it sucks part. Basically being that Robert John Burke, rather, the actor who replaced Peter Weller due to the scheduling conflict, was just nowhere near as good. I think he performed the role just as well. Like, the voice was very clearly different, the face was different, but honestly, outside of just noticing that they were different, I don't really think he portrayed the character any less well. But talking about all those negatives, I just want to say that neither of the negatives I had really, or any other negatives, even ones that I can kind of see the point to, none of that detracted from the fact that, while maybe an unpopular opinion, I don't give a shit. This is my favorite RoboCop movie. And not even in a so bad it's good way. I think this was just the best one. That might be, in fact, I'm pretty much guaranteeing that's an unpopular opinion. But I was more invested in this than the others. Honestly, I was. And yeah, part of it was due to the fact that it very much touched on um, the corruption of law enforcement and capitalism and whatnot. And to a degree, the other movies definitely did too. But this one made it kind of a very huge focal point, in a way that even the other two movies didn't. It just felt like it was more heavy here in how it was handled. Um, it felt more focused than number two, but then again, number two was very just all over the place. Um, and it felt like it was actually trying to do something again. The first movie was great in the fact that it actually had a focused plot and idea and, well, identity to it. The second movie just went completely off the rails and fucked itself over in pretty much every way. But this one, it got back on track. It regained the entire focus, the tone, the consistency. It just felt well handled. There were scenes that were genuinely making me laugh, scenes that genuinely made me get excited. And the villains were so detestable in such a realistic way, it made me despise them to the very core of my being and get excited over them being stopped or even killed. Which is like, if you can make a villain that detestable, that's a good thing. And that's kind of what you want from your villains most of the time, unless you're trying to make a more sympathetic villain, which does happen. But I love the concepts that were brought into this. The resistance group taking on the law enforcement. The concept of getting revenge for his longtime partner's death and everything. Even the law enforcement themselves straight up going rogue against their leaders in two different ways. The Detroit police turning rogue against OCP and deciding to join the resistance, and OCP themselves turning rogue against the CEO, basically. It's like you had both sides of that. And I think that contrast between them was actually really well done when you think about it. I also like the side characters that we got. Like, we got a bigger focus on the doctor in this one, Dr. Lazarus, which, by the way, her name does not go unnoticed by me. I get the joke and reference there. But yeah, it's like she had a more prominent role in this film. I love pretty much all of the resistance fighters that we met. The only one I didn't was the one who ended up being the traitor, who was obviously going to be the traitor anyways. That was blatantly set up. And even though Otomo's climax could have been a little more interesting, he was menacing. All three of the bodies that he had three, there were three of him there. So that was interesting. But yeah, I didn't need necessarily villains that would be extremely hard to take down or give like this big, long, like hugely fought climax. I'm not looking for like an Avengers level climax here. Honestly, RoboCop to me is more about its messages and themes than the actual action. And I think it knocked it out of the park. And again, I thought the writing was great. The pacing was great. It was really well handled in terms of its tone and the consistency. I really loved this one. And again, yes, like I said, part of that is due to the themes and ideas behind it and me kind of vibing with those same themes and ideas. Um, a lot of that is stuff that I openly kind of side with in real life, things like that. So I very much vibe with it in this film. And again, I was just invested more than the other two. Definitely more than number two, but even more than number one. I don't know if you could tell. Maybe you could, but I was invested in this. I was into it at pretty much all times, and it's fantastic in that regard. It just hooked me in, and so it's like, again, even with this being clearly an unpopular opinion, this was my favorite of the RoboCop movies. And I don't give a shit. I'm not going to hide that. I'm not going to be ashamed of that. I don't care if I'm in the minority on that. That is my truth. Um Now, there is still one RoboCop movie left, as I said in the pre-thoughts. There's the 2014 remake, which is a remake of the original. And I don't know who's in it. I just know it's a thing. And I know RoboCop looks a bit different, but that's pretty much it. I don't know like any details or any changes they made or whatnot. Um, so yeah, maybe we'll end up getting to that. Maybe that will end up being a future donation reward from Venom or someone else, or I would be game for that at this point. Just to kind of finish off the franchise and see everything that it has to offer, you know? Even if the remake doesn't end up being as good, even if the remake ends up being bad, I just kind of want to see it. I kind of just want to give it a chance, you know? And especially after this third one, which again is pretty well believed to be bad, and the fact that I loved it this much, like that's kind of saying something. I mean, for one, it's saying that my tastes can never be predicted, and that I don't always agree with the popular consensus, which at this point that's been made pretty clear time and time again. Um, but it's also saying that I kind of enjoy the ideas they could go with in there. So more RoboCop could be good, even if it's an unpopular opinion for me to think so. At this point, I just want to see what the 2014 one has to offer. So that all being said, that all being said, tell me in the comments below, what are your thoughts on RoboCop 3? If there's any specific scenes or whatnot you want my thoughts on or whatnot, feel free to ask. I obviously can't mention everything. I just kind of wanted to give my main thoughts at the end here and compare it to kind of the reasons why people say it's bad generally. Um, but there is also a couple things here, real quick, to mention that apparently are considered to be redeeming qualities from people about the film. They got the composer from the first film, and the soundtrack's good because of that. The second one they list here are that there's moments that are unintentionally funny, and it's like, yeah, I think a lot of movies have those, so that's not even really a note one way or the other. I think that just happens in movies. And the third one, because they only gave 3 redeeming qualities for this, is that the Johnny Rehab commercial is surprisingly well animated. Considering it's animated by Rough Draft Studios. I don't know who Rough Draft Studios are, but it the animation, like, yeah, it was well animated, but I was more just like laughing my ass off at ridiculous nature of it. Um, so yeah, it's just, I feel like a lot of the criticism, at least that's on that list, is unfair, and some of it's just subjective. And again, if you don't like the movie, or if you agree with a lot of that criticism or whatnot, that's fine. You're allowed to have your opinion. I'm not saying you're not. All I'm saying is I don't see a lot of that as true objective criticism. I just see it a lot as just people's opinions on the film and whether or not they personally liked it, not whether or not it was a bad film. Because there is a difference, believe it or not. Though it's really hard to quantify what makes a film good or bad in the first place, because most anything you would judge a film on is subjective. Like whether or not you think the story is good, whether or not you think the acting is good and serves the movie, stuff like that. There is stuff that most people can agree on. Like most times with acting, it's like, yeah, you can tell when the acting is bad. And there's certain plot points that are obviously not great when they do them, certain tropes and all. Yeah, there's ways to tell. But with this movie, I think most of the complaints are just like subjective criticisms. Um, and I just didn't see them. They just weren't a thing for me. The biggest objective criticism there was editing, and all, like with the arm being behind the back and all, which again I didn't even notice as a just general first time watcher. It's not something that just was easily noticeable. Like if you looked at it, if you paused the scene or watched the scene again and again, yeah, of course you would notice. But it's like that's not really gonna be like what you're looking at, and what's gonna be on your radar just tuning in. So out of this trilogy, out of the original trilogy, the second is obviously the worst. And again, personally, I would say this is the best and my personal favorite for sure. I just think this was the most tightly written and the most exciting. Had honestly a great villain, a great story. It was handled well. I am fine with how it turned out. Unpopular opinion, I don't give a shit. But like I said, tell me in the comments below what you thought of the movie. Because these are just my opinions. This is just my viewpoint. And I would like to hear yours. So thank you once again to Venom0027 for donating for this. And for now, I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.